Hello and welcome to another Choose Your Own Adventure novel on my channel. Today we're going to start Wayhaven Chronicles Book 1, and because it looks like this just throws you right in, I thought I'd read you the synopsis quickly before you actually start. And it goes, your first case as a detective is forcing you to open your eyes to a world bigger than you thought. Or maybe it's better to keep them closed. Seems the supernatural didn't get the memo that nothing exciting ever happens in the little town of Wayhaven. So apparently, somewhat like a detective game, I guess. Maybe a mix of mystery, detective, something like that. And it's apparently not too long, which I think I like. Well, we'll we'll see if I like it at the end or if it's just cut off at like an awkward point. But it is, well, as book one seems to suggest, a multi-game series. Book two, I think, got released quite recently, actually. Um, so yeah, let's just start. Moonlight slices through the beakers on the top of the laboratory counter, 100 shafts of light bouncing off the pristine, polished surface. Precise lines of glass tubes held in stark white cartons are piled on the center island. Dr. Ethan Murphy enjoys the small space of his lab, one he has worked hard on making his own. He is grateful for the comforting quiet it brings and is, at that moment, even more thankful for the size of the large counters. They fully hide his crouched, shuddering body as he hunches behind them, biting his lip to stop his shuddering breath giving away his position. Toot toot, Dr. Murphy, nobody likes a coward. The taunt is followed by the smash of glass, shards of the broken beakers glancing around the linoleum floor. Dr. Murphy squeezes his eyes shut and grips his knees closer to his chest, his teeth biting down into his bottom lip hard enough to draw blood. The squeak of the intruder's shoes on linoleum stops. The air falls silent and heavy, pressing down like a weight on Murphy's tight shoulders. If you don't want me to find you, Dr. Murphy, you shouldn't make yourself so tempting. The voice echoes from nowhere, a hungered growl from the darkness. Murphy's eyes snap open as a warm drop of blood dribbles from his lip and soaks into his trousers. He wipes the blood from his lips and chokes back a sob. But it's too late. A hand lurches from the dark and snatches at Murphy like claws around prey. Such an irresistible thing, don't you think? The man whispers, his face shadowed, but the glint in his eyes unmistakable. When his tongue laps over the smear of blood on Murphy's hand, the doctor retches and tries to crawl back, yelling as the hand grips his tighter. The crack of bone perforates the silence. Dear, dear. He tugs on Murphy's mangled hand, dragging him over the slick surface of the linoleum. I don't want to break you, Doctor. Murphy is yanked up onto his feet. The intruder is the same height as he is, but appears 10 feet tall in the gloom. Shh. He places a firm finger on the doctor's lips to stop the trembling cries. Then he takes Murphy's hand in both of his, staring into his eyes with the intense, paralyzing gaze only a predator can achieve. Why don't you relax? The words reverberate like a haunting echo inside Murphy's head, bouncing from one side of his skull to the other until he sways with dizziness. A swathe of calm seeps from his head down into his neck, following his spine and reaching right down to his toes, until he stumbles back from the suddenness of his muscles relaxing. Murphy smiles at the intruder and takes a deep breath. Much better, the intruder whispers before plunging his teeth into Murphy's throat. Meanwhile, the next morning in Wayhaven. The crime scene is a wriggling mass of spectators by the time I arrive, even this early in the morning. People line the small alleyway packed so tightly I can't believe they're able to breathe, let alone fight for space to see the end of the street. Revving the engine of my battered silver hatchback does little to gain anyone's attention, and I realize I can't park unless they move. Not wanting to be late to my very first case as Wayhaven's newly appointed detective, Mm, I lean out the window and ask them to move. I roll down the window of my car and balance an elbow against the door so I can lean out as far as possible. Hey guys, can you move yourself, please? I'm the detective here for this crime scene. My words don't inspire the quick motion that I'd hoped, but the buzzing crowd does reluctantly part. I drive further down the alleyway. Managing to park, I crank on the handbrake, trying to ignore the pain crunching sound the car makes. Out of habit, I glance into the rearview mirror, quickly checking my appearance. I brush a hand over my, most important choice of the game. What color is our hair? I'm pretty sure I've heard strawberry blonde before, but strawberries are kind of pink, reddish. They're not blonde. What is strawberry blonde hair? Hmm. I'm not even sure entirely what my hair color is. I think it's probably dark blonde. It's like either dark blonde or light brown. Actually, might be light brown. I brush a hand over my light brown hair. Figuring there is little else I can do to procrastinate, I finally force myself out of the car. There's always something you can do to procrastinate a little bit more. The chill air bites at my skin as soon as I step out of the warm comfort of the car. I shove my hands into the pockets of my coat, shivering at the relief it provides from the sharp cold. Buds may be clinging to the few stark trees lining the alleyway, but it is far from spring yet. It looks as though most of Wayhaven has gathered at the scene, which is more likely true than not, considering the whole town consists of less than 1,000 people. As I step up to the blue and white striped barrier, I'm greeted by Officer Len, a part-time volunteer on the scant Wayhaven police force. I wonder for a moment if his hunched posture is from the grisly nature of the crime or just his advanced age. Part-time volunteer. For some reason, part-time volunteer to me always sounds like, yeah, sort of like a teenager or very young. But I guess you can still be part-time once you're of a pension age. He looks up from his pad, and I can almost hear the creaking in his bones at the motion. I wait as he speaks to greet me, his voice croaking from out his thin lips, partly hidden by a scraggly grey beard that matches the color of his skin. Finally, he says, "Credentials, please." I let out a long sigh. Are we really going to do this, Len? You started working as a volunteer long after I joined the force. Sorry, but it's Mayor's orders, he replies. I'm hesitant to open my coat after just managing to get warm, but I pull one side open to yank out my badge and ID. I hand it over, Len not even glancing at it before handing it back. His eyesight may be bad, but even he cannot fail to recognize me. All good, detective. Step on through. I take back my ID and dip under the barrier Len is struggling to keep raised. As I move away from him, I glance down at my new ID. Detective. It's the first time I've been addressed that way by one of my colleagues. It's strange to hear my new title. It belonged to old Detective Real for so long that I'm not sure if it fits me quite yet. After all, the only training I've had was the rushed speech I received from the mayor addressing my many merits and how to show my willingness to take over. The total of my detective experience probably amounts to that hour he spent lecturing me. The promotion was rushed through in time for Real's retirement party, leaving me spinning on how to react to the whole thing. Uh, yeah, I think this is relatable. Didn't really want it, but I wasn't going to turn it down when offered. I know really the only reason I got it was because the captain needed someone in the station of a senior position so he could go off and play golf with the mayor whenever he wants. But still, pay raise for me. I smile and shake my head at the thought. My photo stares back at me from the ID pouch. I glance over my details, my name listed boldly at the top. I think we're going to go with actually choosing a name this time out of the options provided. Jules? Sam? Val? Ainsley? Alex? Hmm, I like Jules. Uh, hmm, Jules Langford, sure. Finally here then, Detective Langford. I glance up at the sound of the familiar voice, a smile already on my face. Officer Tina Poname strides towards me, my old partner grinning at me as she nears. Not much of a surprise they're all gathered here, she says, gesturing to the crowd behind us. I look over my shoulder at the bustle of people, sunlight glinting off the phones held ready to take whatever pictures they can. This is this is probably the biggest thing that's happened for years, I reply with a shrug. She nods in response, brushing back a few brown curls that bob in front of her hazel eyes. Like, Game, please tell me who is saying this. I can't help but notice none of the fancy-dancy silver spoons have bothered to show up. Her nose wrinkles as she speaks, the freckles splattered over her rosy cheeks becoming more pronounced with the expression. Don't suppose they care what happens to us normal folk as long as no one touches their mansions. But anyway, how's the first day of your promotion going? Depends on how gruesome the murder is. I reply, shoving my hands deeper into my pockets. She purses her lips and sighs. And it's going to be a terrible day, I'm afraid. Is that bad? I'd say so, but then I've never actually seen a murder before. She dares a glance down the street at the scene. Though it's half hidden by white clad crime scene technicians, the techs all busy themselves placing down yellow tags and measuring out every inch of space. There's the occasional bright flash as they take photos. Excuse me. Her voice stops us before we move. I need to know what's going on. I demand to know. Ina's grip on her belt tightens and I let out a drawn breath. I'm the landlord of these apartments. The man, an older gentleman in a crisp grey suit, sweeps an arm upwards at the soaring, crumbling building beside us. Um, hmm, not exactly something to be proud of, sir, I say in reply. The man's face scrunches into a ball of red anger at my words. Tina tries to stifle a laugh, but before laying a hand on my shoulder. I'll deal with them. It's not your job to calm the riffraff anymore, detective. I throw her a grateful nod as she moves towards the landlord with a stern frown. Her tall, statuesque figure is hidden behind a stiff, unshapely dark blue uniform. Her pretty features contrast against the heavy belt and boots she wears. If I'd known her before becoming such good friends as partners, I guess I might have made a move. I'm only attracted to women. I shake away the thought, turning to head towards the crime scene. It's not far before I stumble to a stop, holding up my hands to keep balance as a technician walks in front of my path. The woman clicks her tongue at me before continuing to bend down and retrieve a piece of trash, carefully storing it in a clear plastic bag and sealing the top. I move forwards once more, my path like a dance as I make my way through a maze of yellow tags and disgruntled technicians. I avoid coming up against a wall, which is slick with something I don't even want to think about. Thankfully, I make it past the busiest part to find Dr. Turner crouched over the body. He looks up at me and frowns. Sorry this has to be your first case, Jules. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think. I delivered you as a baby and now here you are as a peer. His pride in me is dulled somewhat due to a meeting over a dead body. The gloomy light of the morning makes the grey peppering his short black hair seem lighter, and his deep brown skin a little more aged than usual. A quiet punctuates the air between us. Dr. Turner returns to looking over the still figure at his feet. Do you know who the victim is? I haven't had a proper look at them yet. I had to wait until those city boys were done, he says, and I note the glare he throws towards the crime scene techs. Wayhaven is too small and quiet a place for those types of people, so when a major crime happens, they are sent down to aid from the big city. It's the first time this has happened in my lifetime, and the city techs and small town people obviously aren't mixing well. Turner places his hands beneath the body before rolling it over. I wince a little at the dull thud that sounds as it topples over completely, a reaction noted by the keen, if aging, doctor. I don't recognize the woman spread on the trash-lined street before me, her blonde hair matted and her freckled, pale skin marred with bruises. Neither, it seems, does the doctor. You don't know her? I ask. No, he replies. I don't think she can be from Wayhaven. I see to pretty much everyone's health here, and I've never seen her before. I give a nod of understanding and look back at the lifeless woman. Um, continue looking without issue. I continue looking over the woman without issue, wondering who she might be. You're braver than I was when I saw my first body, Dr. Turner says with a half smile. I just can't believe there's been a murder here in Wayhaven. My words come out in a confused mumble. I know what you mean. The last time there was violence in this town was back in my grandfather's day, he says, shaking his head. His thin-framed glasses wriggle down his nose. He pushes them back up and shrugs. Can you give me the time of death? I ask. That's not my call to make, he replies, bristling slightly with his words. That's your man's job back at the lab. He doesn't bother to hold back the disdain in his voice, obviously not pleased at having to give responsibility to another city boy. I'm only here to make sure the body is really dead. Hmm. The quicker we can clear this up, the better. I fold my arms. I don't want an unsolved murder to be the thing I'm remembered for in this town. I'm sure you'll be fine, he says. How hard can it be to find a murderer in a town this size? I arch a brow, not sure I have as much confidence as he does. He turns to face the text behind him, their mask-covered faces giving them an eerie look. You can take the body away now. He then strides away down the street to where his black sports car is parked. Good luck with it all, Jules. He calls back with a slight wave of his hand. Find out anything useful from the doc? Ina asks as she moves back to my side. We both watch for a moment as the techs move forward to throw a white cloth over the victim. We'll know more than when Verda takes a look at her, I reply. Are you okay getting statements from the witnesses? Sure, she replies. I've already started on it. I give a nod of appreciation. Take Douglas from the station if you need help. I'd have better luck getting help from a parrot than from that boy, she scoffs. She moves away, her pad flipped open in preparation. With the crowds, the technicians, and the sheer amount of rubbish still littering the alleyway, I'm not sure how much more I can get from the crime scene. I begin to head out of the street and back towards my car. Officer Langford. Detective. My shoulders instantly hunch at the voice, and I roll my head from side to side to release the sudden tension before turning to face the source of the call. Bobby Marks, I say. Why am I not surprised to find you here? Bobby, being the only journalist in the small town, leaps on any kind of gossip she can. I I even read all the way ahead to figure out if it's male and female, saw Bobby, and it's a woman after all. God's sake. Whether it be true or not, this is probably the closest to real news she's ever had. Bobby also happens to have a reputation as a giant pain in the ass. Still, as far as my relationship with her goes, only met her a few times. I've only met Bobby a few times, but I do know she uses bribes to find out extra information from some of her volunteers, as well as wriggling her way into people's personal lives to report to everyone in town. Yeah, she doesn't bother me much. We bump into each other now and then, but neither of us pays much mind to the other. She grins at me as she approaches, her phone held out like a microphone. What's happened here? Can you tell me? Nope, can't. I reply curtly, pushing the phone back as she thrusts it closer. Nothing at all? Nope, nothing at all. I repeat, digging beneath the barrier and heading for the sanctuary of my car. It'll be a while before Solomon Verda, Wayhaven's only pathologist, has anything to report, so I decide to take a quick brunch. I drive the car around to the swanky modern side of town. The red brick factories that make up every foundation and building in Wayhaven have all been given a coat of fresh white or classy grey paint in this area. Tidy shop fronts line the streets, each with a scripted scrolling shop name across the top of the door. The square is the center of this modern hub, and I pull up to park beside the bakery. Getting out, I try not to break my ankle on the aesthetically pleasing but treacherous cobblestone street. Thankfully, the wet, slushy blanket of leaves that covers the roads of Wayhaven have long ago been cleared away from the square. I doubt the leaves even had a chance to touch the ground before someone was plucking them up and throwing them out. The bakery is surprisingly empty. I stumble to a stop inside the doorway as a waft of hot air lined with the scent of fresh bread embraces me. Good morning, Jules. Haley, the bakery owner, greets me with a grin, her ivory cheeks flushed red and a ring of white blonde hair just visible beneath a red and white checkered chef's hat. What can I get you? I stare at the curved display and the pastry goodies spread behind it, the fresh warmth of them streaming at the glass. I'll take tea in the pastry. I'll have a tea, please. My gaze flickers to the pastries, their scent enticing me closer. And one of those. She gives a smile and turns to the counter behind her, the aroma of hot tea mixing with the pastries making my stomach rumble. After a moment, she turns back and places down the paper cup and bag on the counter. On the house. Are you sure? She nods. I heard you're gonna need it, what with that murder and all. She grimaces and wipes her hand on her apron. I guess word gets around quick. That shouldn't surprise you, she says, chuckling. It's worse than when we were in school. I nod in agreement. There's a saying in Wayhaven that if you don't know what's going on, you just have to ask the person next to you. Insular is an understatement. At least I know it's you out there protecting us, she says with a genuine smile. I give a slow nod. I joined the police force because, um, hmm, kind of like the thought of that. Nothing happens in Wayhaven seemed like an easy job. Everyone knows nothing ever happens in Wayhaven. Nothing. Joining the force seemed like an easy job, and so far it has been. The worst I've had to deal with is vandalism and graffiti. Well, there was that time Myla Evans knocked her tennis ball through Jake Marshall's window, but that was all an accident. Seems like this murder isn't going to be a walk in the park, though. I grab up my goods coming out of my thoughts. Thanks for this. With a grateful nod, I leave the shop and attempt to traverse my way over the cobblestone once again. I'm just about to sip my drink when my phone buzzes. Verda's name highlighted on the screen. With a sign, I put down my things, start the engine, and make my way over a couple of blocks to the station. Back at the station. Morning, Douglas, I call as I push open the heavy glass door. Pleased to be back in the familiar setting of the station. It was once a factory, but the insides have been completely refurbished into a bright modern work area. The walls are mostly made of large windows, and the workstations are efficient but open. The young officer seated behind the grey faux marble front desk of the station scrambles to shove his cell phone into his pocket. Instead, he only manages to drop it on the floor. We both stare at the item as it spins on its back before slowing to a stop. Douglas shifts his wide-eyed gaze at me, both of us realizing work had been far from his mind while I'd been out. I thin my lips and thought, suddenly presented with how to deal with the mayor's son now that I'm in charge of the station. Hmm. Uh, I'm not gonna parent the kid. That's the mayor's job. Let him have the phone. I let out a long, drawn out breath and begin moving towards the pathologist's lab. I watch his long bangs flick into his eyes as he watches me for a moment, the light blonde hair almost lost against his pale skin. Pick up the phone, kid, I call as I pass, hearing Douglas's pleased reply, then his footsteps as he scrabbles to retrieve the object. As I push open the doors to the staircase that leads down to the basement lab, I wonder if how I dealt with Douglas was the right move. The all powerful Mayor Friedman doesn't like any insult to his name, so Douglas must be a real disappointment. Still, Douglas is kind enough, just young and not great at actually remembering to focus on his work. What work? Nothing ever happens in Wayhaven, right? I shake the thought away as the chill of the basement sinks into my skin. My gaze flashes over the no food or drink sign nailed to the wall just a few feet from the lab, and I grip my drink. I mean, there's something that might surprise you. It's sort of a new invention that's called just putting your drink to the side and picking it up again later. You don't really have to throw it away, but I'll keep hold of it. Be a waste. I keep walking past the sign, clutching my drink tighter. The warmth of it seeps into my fingers, and I'm glad I chose a warm beverage before visiting the chill lab. The pastry crumbs don't exactly look professional, though, so I brush them away quickly before moving on. I bump the heavy door open with one hip, pacing into the clean room behind. White tiled walls shine all around. The shimmering silver machines dotted about the edges of the room are not very welcoming. I don't know how you work down here, I say, spying Verda sitting at his metal desk to one corner. The slender, short man isn't even wearing gloves, just a suit and a simple white medical coat. He turns and gives a grin, the expression making his dark brown eyes shimmer even in the dull electric light.
This is the first time I've really had to work,
He says, running a hand over his styled brunette hair that he always has highlighted, the color complementing his light brown skin.
Mostly I just deal with the overflow of natural deaths Dr. Turner can't manage.
He stands from his chair and moves closer, his gaze shifting to the drink in my hands.
You know you're not supposed to have that in here.
I arch a brow, my own focus moving to the steaming mug of coffee on his desk. And neither are you. He smiles, the expression bright and full of cheer. I snap out of my thoughts, our attention back on the white sheet on the table. The woman's head and shoulders are the only things visible. You haven't started the autopsy yet? He shakes his head.
No, but
He purses his lips, a shadow of a goatee framing them.
I found something you might need.
He spins around, lifting an evidence bag off the nearby counter. Inside is a cell phone. They couldn't find this on her at the scene, I say, taking the bag and looking over it.
It was in her boot.
We both stare down at the woman, her skin now a grey white, her lips so pale they seem to have sunken back and disappeared. Hmm. Uh, We need to find her identity, so I can find the killer. We really need to find her identity.
I'm sure you'll do fine, Detective.
Verda replies, his shoulders sagging slightly. I frown a little at his less than enthusiastic reply.
There's not much I can tell you at the moment,
Verda continues.
though I did notice bruises around her wrists and ankles.
She was tied down? I ask, the thought making my chest tight.
So it would seem.
His voice trails off in obvious sympathy for the poor woman. My hand tightens around the cell phone and I bring it up to turn it on through the evidence bag. The phone flashes to life and I give a sigh of relief to find it's not pin protected. Flicking through the call log, there are the usual names, home, work, but then only a very few other numbers. The texts are pretty standard too, though, again, very few of them.
She obviously didn't get out much.
Verda says as he glances over the phone too. I can't blame her, being that sociable is overrated. I say, continuing to flick through the phone. Verda chuckles.
Life shouldn't be all about work, Detective.
But it doesn't need to be all socializing either. He arches a brow, then grins.
That's true. To each their own, I guess.
The conversation is halted as I go through the photos on her phone. A few catch my attention.
Something wrong?
Verda asks. No, it's just... I stare at the pictures closer. They're blurred as though taken in motion, but the stained walls and cracked metal beams are familiar. I recognize where these pictures were taken, and they seem to be the last photos she took.
You think she managed to capture where she was murdered?
Possibly, I reply, shutting off the phone and frowning. Looks like it's from the old Faris warehouse at the edge of town. Tina and I had quite a few patrols up there. It's falling to pieces, but the teenagers still insist on risking their necks by going in it.
Ah, to be youthful once more,
Verda says, to which I can't help but laugh.
Will you go over to the warehouse now?
I will, after I've done some paperwork. I reply, moving to the doorway and glancing back at him.
Alone?
I've got my radio if I need backup, but I'm pretty sure Tina checked it out already the other day. I can't imagine some deranged murderer is still hanging about in there. He frowns in concern.
Be careful, Detective.
You worried about me, Verda?
You're about the best person I've worked for.
He replies with just as much of a smile.
I don't fancy having to get used to someone new.
My laughter echoes about the room as I make my way out, shaking my head and feeling much better than I have since finding out about the case.